great thing about football is that it forces you to deny your basic human instincts to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And at some point, emotion overrides intellect, and you hit the easy button and you take your foot off the gas and people stumble. Championship programs and organizations don't do that. I'm Aaron Taylor, and I'm coached to win.
There's an old saying that you hear analysts use all the time, especially former offensive linemen, and it goes something like this. There is no greater joy in life than moving a man from point A to point B against his will. Well, that phrase was coined by Joe Moore, legendary offensive line coach from Pitt and Notre Dame. Our next guest, Aaron Taylor, well, that was his coach when he played football at the University of Notre Dame. You're going to hear a lot of great stories about Aaron Taylor and the impact that his coach, Joe Moore, had on him. Now, Aaron Taylor is unique. And when I say unique, I mean this in a good way, meaning in a good way. There may not be another guy like him. His storytelling, well, it may be the best in media. Every single story that he tells is told as if it's happening for the first time. Energy, passion, emotion. Can't wait for you to hear. So let's get right to the coaching points that I took from my interview with Aaron Taylor. Here's the first one. Why is it important coaches get it right? Good people equal success. The credo, I am because of us. What does it mean and where did it come from? And oh, by the way, I'm going to give you a bonus coaching point. The song In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. Is it the best pregame hype song in the history of sports? We talked about that. Here's my conversation with Aaron Taylor.
Well, AT, like this show is all about coaching and teaching and philosophy and looking at your coaching tree. Because I look at mine, I'm like, wow, I feel like I was really lucky.
Looking at your coaching tree, realize that you went to high school at De La Salle High School in Concord, California, and your coach was the legendary high school football coach Bob Ladouceur. He's famous for having won 151 games in a row, still a national record. And I'm curious, what was young Aaron Taylor like back in those days?
I was a kid that was trying to find my way. I was a DNF student. I liked to smoke weed and drink in my early years. I inhaled. I held my breath. I rolled the windows up. I did as much as I could. But behind that, man, I was a hurting little kid. And parents divorced at 2. There was physical, sexual abuse at 5, at 8, abandonment. Every 2 years, for one reason or another, we moved from place to place, school to school. So it was always new friends, new rules, new teachers, new everything. And I wanted to fit in, man. And the world gave me messages, and I chose to believe them, unfortunately, that I didn't matter and that I wasn't enough. So the lowest common denominator hanging out was the people that like to party, and I got kicked out of the house. But what allowed me to come back into the house was finding some direction in my life. And that night when I came back, there was a TV show on that was talking about this high school across the bay called De La Salle, and their head coach, Bob Ladouceur, that his players knew that they weren't it, that they were part of it. And there was this ideal and standard that was higher than even him, and he had to live up to it. It was just all these things that he was talking about that really resonated. And I said, see, Mom, that's a type of place that I think would be good for me. And little did I know that she, called behind my back, basically, the school, and I took a test and got placed and ended up being able to go there my last 2 years of high school, and went from D's and F's to A's and B's in about 6 months. It was crazy.
So you actually were living this wild life, and you noticed that there was maybe an alternative, something maybe a little bit more beneficial for you. And you, at that age, identified that as an opportunity to flip things around.
I don't know if I was that aware. You're giving me a lot more credit maybe than I deserve.
Well, we're looking back now. When you look back, or was it just, oh, that's different?
No, my mom said, what do you want to do with yourself? I was like, I don't know, play pro football. Now, mind you, I'd never played organized tackle football in my life. I was the classic tweener. I was too heavy for my age group and too young for my weight class. So I never got to play Pop Warner. But she said, how do you do that? I was like, oh, you just go to college and they give you a scholarship and then draft you. She's like, oh, you just get a scholarship and they just draft you. Does everybody get drafted? And no, and she worked me back to choices, actions, and consequences, right? The things that I was doing today were directly impacting who and what I would become tomorrow. And for the first time in my life, I saw the disconnect. I was like, oh, okay, I need to get my act together. And boom, man, soon as I identified, Christian, what it is I wanted to do, the invisible doors started to open. And from that standpoint, it was effortless, man. All I had to do was work hard. Everybody got this much better. I got that much better. It was incredible how quickly it happened.
And so obviously you go to offensive line, but I'm curious if Ladouceur is your coach and you didn't know that he'd go on this run of 151 wins and just really just change high school football and the way coaches run their football program to how he managed in-season activities, his off-season with the summer program, how diligent he was by that. He created this culture. Mm-hmm. And just looking at the list of greats that went to De La Salle, it's funny, I was irritated for you. Out of all the names, like your name wasn't on the top 15 list. I was like, why is Aaron Taylor not on this list? There's always Maurice Jones-Drew. There's always Amari Toomer. There's always those guys. You were not top 15. I feel like we need to write in and start all over again or something.
I was the trailblazer, Christian. I'm good with that. And I was grateful that a lot of dudes were able to come behind me. DJ Williams. I mean, there was a lot of cats that came out of there and played a lot of years, both in college and the NFL. The culture was the key, man. Like, we beat people in the fourth quarter, and we beat people because we cared about each other more than the other teams cared about beating us. And we did that on Thursday night team dinners where we'd go to a different player's house. It was hosted by a different parent, and it was spaghetti and lasagna and garlic bread, and we'd all get together and break bread. But then afterwards, we talk X's and O's. And it was about knowing your job and your assignment. And the coaches would, test you with these little minutia questions. You get up and have an accountability card about a goal that you wanted to accomplish, things that you said you wanted to do, and the team would help you be accountable for that. You'd have an accountability partner. And it was really about, I know what to do. You can count on me. You can trust me. And as I look back at De La Salle, I look back at Notre Dame, and I look back going to back-to-back Super Bowls, being in a championship organization like yourself, it's different, man. And I think the you got to be talented, but you also have to have trust, because trust says in the inevitable times of adversity, you can count on me. I will be there. I will do my job. I will find a way to get it done no matter what. And Bob and his staff with those Thursday night team dinners and then our Friday chapel services where it got all kinds of dusty, where you pick a Bible verse or pick a song in the air tonight by Phil Collins. Bro, we was ready to run through that butcher paper and kill El Cerrito.
Yeah, that one, the Phil Collins song gets everybody. I've been to so many different meetings and from all walks of life, and they put on Phil Collins in the air tonight. Yeah, let's go. You wait for that one part where the crescendo where they get going and everybody's running out of the building. You mentioned trust, though, AT, and everyone throws that out. Oh, trust. You got to build trust. Culture. You mentioned you had it in high school, and we're going to get to college, and we're going to get to the pros. How was it formed in high school? Was it just as easy as, hey, I said something, I kept my word? It's not just a bunch of bull crap that I'm spitting out into the universe. I'm actually mean what I'm saying, and I'm backing it up with example after example.
Trust is earned. So it's developed through consistency, and it takes time to do that. It's really easy to break it, but really difficult to create it and to establish it. And that's why it's something that I think amongst all other attributes really needs to be worked to be preserved in successful organizations and teams. It's got to start there. It's where, kids don't care what you know until they know that you care. Like, do you have my best interests in mind? Can I trust you that when you jump my ass and yell at me, that it's to help build me and not for your sake that you're frustrated that I made you look bad? Now, the words may sound the same and the videotape of that coach yelling at the player may be the same, but the energy that is communicated back and forth is implicitly understood by players. And I think even young players understand where the coach's intentions are. So it's got to be a two-way street. We have to earn the coach's trust with our consistency in play, and they have to earn ours by having answers, by having a good plan, by giving us an opportunity, by letting it be a merit-based, culture, those sort of things. So it takes a while, just like in a relationship. You don't go on a first date with a woman that you end up marrying and spend the rest of your life with and, open up and tell your whole story. You just try to buy her as many drinks as you can and hope to get lucky. And when you don't, then you go, okay, this might be a keeper. And that's really oversharing on my story, but I love my wife.
That's fine. Yeah. Is that the part to me, it's what you just explained is a player being coachable. Sometimes I feel when a coach says a player isn't coachable, I feel like they have something to do with it. Saying they're not coachable to me is sometimes a cop-out. Well, he's not coachable. What do you want me to do? Throw your hands up. I can't get through to him. What do you want me to do? Well, maybe you should change your approach. Ultimately, I think each side bears some of the responsibility. You have to be open to the coaching, and you have to have the intelligence to make me believe I should use your technique and your philosophy to benefit from me. And then it'll manifest itself on the field, and we'll brag about it when we watch film.
Yep, it's a two-way street, man. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Players do have to be open to being coached, and it gets harder and harder, especially today where everybody's coddled and cuddled for kids to be coached hard like we were. I had a coach, Joe Moore, who sent 52 dudes to the NFL in 18 seasons. That's almost 3 per year. Never had a senior starter at Notre Dame that at least didn't have a cup of coffee in 9 years in the NFL. So his track record is unparalleled. I created a college football award in his honor. But that award is about toughness, and that award is about teamwork, and it's about us. I am because of us and the culture that was there. He worked us to a bone, man, but he did it for our sake, not for his. He always had our back when it came down to the coaches or the outside words or whatever. His job was to build belief in us, and first he believed in us, then we believed in his belief. Finally, we believed in ourselves, and when that happened, our opponents had problems. So there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, but to your point, sometimes players are so insecure that it's hard for them to be corrected. And I talk to young folks about having a kitchen strainer mentality, right? You take the strainer, it all goes in, you keep the good stuff and let the ish fall down the drain and let it go. But keep the stuff that's constructive, that can help you grow, that's intended to help you be better. And you'll know pretty quickly when you look at it through that lens, whether or not the words that are being shared with you have your best interest in mind, right? Are they qualified to be saying what they're saying?
Exactly.
If that answer's on Twitter or X, that answer's no. Don't even trip, let it go. But if it's somebody that you respect, if it's one of your coaches, if it's a teammate saying, Christian, man, we need a little bit more out of you, bud. Or Aaron, come on, man, you're not yourself. You're not playing with the same effort that you're playing with. Like, those are the sorts of things where, like, okay, and you start to build that bond that you're going to need in the playoffs in the fourth quarter at some point when everything's on the line and you look in the huddle, not that they huddle much anymore, but know that everybody's together and that you've got a shot.
So you mentioned Joe Moore. Now, for people who don't know, Joe Moore, legendary offensive line coach, coached at Pitt, Russ Grimm, had a ton of guys. You mentioned 52 dudes that he coached that are in that played in the NFL. He's your coach at Notre Dame, and your head coach is Lou Holtz. 90 to 94 for me, 89 to 93 for you.
90 to 94 for me as well.
90 94. Okay, so same. And Joe Moore ends up being this inspiration, not only to you, but all the other offensive linemen. And you mentioned this credo that you have for the Joe Moore Award that you created, that you established in 2015. And it's different than the rest of the awards because you won the Lombardi Award, which is given to the best offensive lineman. I don't know how you didn't win the Outland Trophy because that's given to, I guess, the best. It probably went to a defensive player, I'm assuming.
It did. Rob Waldrop.
Okay. Yeah. So it should have went to you, but fine. You're a 2-time All-American. You win a national championship. But you decide to make an award, not for Lou Holtz, but for Joe Moore. And you mentioned the credo, I am because of us. It seems like a rallying cry. Like, what did you guys do when you broke the huddle? Did you guys all hold hands and say, I am because of us, and then snap the ball?
We can do this.
Well, we can do it.
Let's go get them. We got this. We can do it. No, that was really the credo itself, which is a long form, was really the North Star of what we wanted the award to be about. We were, building the airplane in the air when we took off in June of 2015. It was unprecedented. We were the only group or unit award. We didn't know how to vote or how to evaluate, and we just kind of had to figure it out on the fly, and ironically use the same principles that it requires to play the position to create the award that celebrates it. But the notion of I am because of us really came from the mind of a good dear friend, the late Jack Sichterman, who passed away, unfortunately, at a very young age from brain cancer, which is so ironic because his brain was so incredibly astute at being able to congeal these big concepts and condense them down into as few words as possible. So we spent months talking about the position, and he grew up in Wisconsin, was a big Packer and Badgers fan, and loved the sport of football, even though he was a hooper. But I really had to kind of coach him up about the ethos of 5 functioning as 1, the sum being, or the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, and just that whole notion of what it takes to be on a team of any sort, let alone in the O-line room. And he was the one that came up with that. And I was like, that's it. That's the single sentence that defines who we are and what we represent. We take the game and the position a hell of a lot more seriously than we take ourselves. But I exist because of my teammates that are going through the same things for the same reasons that I do on a daily basis.
So I thought that was unique. And Joe Moore, it was funny because I was cracking up. I went back and found some footage from 1993 where you and your buddies were mocking the hell out of Joe Moore and his way of coaching. And I think it was your voice that I heard mocking Joe Moore. You do a great Joe Moore and you do a great Lou Holtz.
I can't take credit for that. That was Kevin.
Okay, that wasn't you.
It was our kicker, and he was phenomenal at impressions.
Wait, the kicker was the guy doing the offensive lineman's coach?
Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So you're just an NFL lineman. You don't give a shit, do you?
Hold on. Before we go any farther, make sure you click that subscribe button real quick and turn on your notifications. All right, here we go. Back to the show.
What's the most impactful thing or funny thing that he said that you remember? I mean, I'm sure there's a ton. Is there one that stands out more than the rest?
Well, there's I'll give you a funny one and the one that's really touching. But he walked into the meeting one day and said, "Hey, Taylor, I wish you were the heavyweight champ of the world. You know why?" And I'm a sophomore. I'm like, no, coach, I don't know why. He said, "Because I'd be the next. Now sit down and shut the F up." And I was like, Everybody started laughing, and you would kind of laugh, and he had this sense of humor about him that he rarely shared with us. It was more at our expense, but there was a game that we played my junior year where we only rushed for 250 plus yards, and he was pissed. And we came back and we were going to watch the film, and he said, "If you guys aren't going to block on Saturday, then we're going to block on Monday. We're going to block on Tuesday. We're going to block on Wednesday. We're going to block on Thursday." He said, "Don't sit down. Get your pads. Go out to the field. Practices start." We're Flex isn't for another 2 hours. What do you mean? So we go out to the indoor, and when we get out there, the entire scout team defense is there. And they're in full pads, and we're looking at each other like what the deal is. Long story short, he puts us up tackle to tackle to do base blocks. 2 defenders, 1 offensive lineman, and a linebacker. The 2 defenders were diving at the ground on the snap. The linebacker was pushing our head down so that we could fight to keep it up. And all we had to do was block them and drive them 10 yards. So Lindsey Knapp was our left tackle. He started. He must have went 20 times in a row. He can't even pick himself up. He's vomiting through his face mask. Then it was my turn, and I was like, I ain't making Lindsey's mistake. I'm going to make noise. I'm going to make sure he knows.
Make it look harder.
And he'd look at me and go, 5 more good ones, Taylor, and you're done. And I'd give him everything I had, Christian. And I'd stand up because I wasn't going to let that son of a bitch break me. And I looked down and he said, 5 more. I was like, damn it. We go tackle to tackle twice. Coach Holtz comes up and says, Joe, what are you doing? He's like, "We're seeing who's tough, coach." "Okay." He drives off on his car and was like, "No." So fast forward to my senior year, the rite of passage, he takes you out for burgers and beers.
Okay.
He says, "Hey, Taylor, come here." He's like, "You remember that day we did the toughness drill?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You remember I'd say do 5 more? And you'd look at me with them puppy dog eyes, give me everything you had, and I'd make you do 5 more. I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You know why I did that?" And I was like, "No, coach." And he said, "I did that because I wanted you to know that when you were tired in the 4th quarter of a game and we needed to pick up a first down and you had been playing hard. And every time I tell this story, I get choked up. He said, I wanted you to know that you had 5 more in you. And he said, one day you're going to be in the NFL and be a father and be a husband, and the world's not always going to treat you fair. And when you feel like quitting and you don't think you can do anymore, I wanted you to remember that day so that you always knew you had 5 more in you. And that's what good coaches do, Christian. They're good teachers. He wasn't doing that to punish us. He was doing it to build us, because he was committed to getting us to be the best versions of ourselves despite our own perceived limitations. And I thank my life that a man like that came into my life and believed and loved in me enough to push me to my limit so I could push through it.
He's a big reason you are the way you are, I'm assuming. He has a big impact on you, obviously. I was looking at your squad and the guys on your team. So you win a national championship, and then you play Colorado. You played Colorado in the Orange Bowl, but you ended up losing that game. I'll make sure I bring that up, because that was very impactful to me in my life.
I think that was the last time Colorado won, but whatever.
That Notre Dame team, with all those expectations that come even today with a Notre Dame team, what I would say back in its heyday when you guys were rolling, recruiting was strong. Lou Holtz had his finger on the pulse of everything that was important. Like, his pregame speeches were legendary. Catholics versus convicts, all that stuff. What was the common denominator for that team that you can remember?
Good people, man. Like, good people. That was the deal. Notre Dame was unique and special back in the day, and I wasn't part of the 88 championship team, but they were a big reason why I came on the campus, and many of those guys that won that championship were there for another 2 years, 90 and 91 when I arrived on campus, all of us. And I think on our recruiting trip, 20 of the 25 guys that were invited on that December 2nd, 1989, I guess it had to have been, weekend, ended up signing. And that was me and Bryant Young, and I think Jerome came the week after. He was one of the 6, but we had 6 first-rounders eventually out of that class that signed, and we immediately were tight, man. And I think it just felt like home for me. And looking back, obviously going to a Catholic high school those last 2 years at De La Salle, there was some familiarity, right? But the quality of person, man, you got to understand, there were a lot of other options of places for us to go. Going there, we knew we were going to be challenged in the classroom. Going there, we knew we were going to stand out and look different from a lot of the people that went there. But there was something greater that we wanted to be a part of that we also sensed. So it kind of self-selected. Dudes that weren't about that didn't go there, and that's okay. That doesn't make them bad dudes. But there were a special type of dude, or at least a different one like myself, that welcomed that and wanted that. And I didn't know if I was going to play in the NFL back then, but I knew I needed to graduate, and they graduated 97% of the players, and I wasn't the smartest student, but I knew I wasn't 3%. So if I went there, I'd at least have a degree, so that box was checked. And that was among the big reasons why I think myself and a lot of other people went there. That was the first year of the NBC contract, which was unprecedented to have all of your home games televised. That had never happened before. And they were 2 years off from a national championship with this Lou Holtz guy that seemed to know what he was doing.
Then you get drafted first in the first round by Green Bay, the Green Bay Packers, and your head coach is Mike Holmgren. And on the offense, you have Gil Haskell, you have Steve Mariucci, you have John Gruden. Andy Reid was a tight ends coach. Mm-hmm. That staff, and I only mess with the defensive side. That offensive staff was pretty legit. In your quarterback room, you have Mark Brunell, Ty Detmer, and
Doug Peterson,
and Brett Favre. Doug Peterson again. Yeah, there's another guy. So, and all these guys ended up. When you first got there, were you just like, all right, okay, this is just like Notre Dame? Was it similar, or did that get built over time as well? Because Green Bay didn't. Well, they won Super Bowl 31, but that was a couple years after you arrived.
Yeah, and the first year that I was healthy, I just want the record. Those are facts. I'm not saying it was me. I'm just stating facts. Okay. Culturally, it was very similar, man. And Ron Wolf was the GM. Every year, if you look at his track record, he drafted Notre Dame guys. He liked them to be in the culture because of what it meant for the locker room, even though, all things being equal, you got 2 linebackers or 2 running backs that are about the same. Take the kid from Notre Dame. He's going to, give you some of that plus stuff and be a glue player, if you will. But we also had Reggie White in that locker room. And, famously, God told him to go to Green Bay and he'd win a Super Bowl. And lo and behold, that's what happened. We almost won 2. But there was something different and unique about that. And I think what spoke to our culture is the year we won the Super Bowl, we brought Andre Rison in halfway through the year. And his nickname for the listeners was Bad Moon Rison. He was dating hip-hop stars, and there was fires and all kind of chaos that traveled with this extremely talented player. But it was like, man, is the juice worth the squeeze with this guy? Why in the world would Ron Wolf be willing to taint this championship run just to get another healthy, good quality receiver? And what Ron knew and other people didn't was that our culture was so strong that there was no chance that Dre was going to come in and lower our bar. We were going to raise his. And I will take to my grave that he was a great teammate. He stepped in. He was grateful to be there. He made a huge difference and impact, including in the Super Bowl. And that was all based on the set and setting for him. It was a culture where he was allowed to thrive and not get away with the stuff. And he didn't have to shoulder the whole burden. He wasn't allowed to do that. We were too talented, and it just was baked into the cake. You were going to get your touches if you did your job. Favre, would ensure that. And that's kind of one of the things when I look back, almost as a measuring stick of a culture. Can you plug and play anybody into it and they adopt to the culture, or does it go the other way, right? Cancers are contagious. Yeah. We know that, but so is a championship mindset. And Green Bay was one of the best I'd ever been in.
There's, I think his name is Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer.
Yeah.
You've ever seen him on TV. So I think it's very interesting. And I think it's comparable to what happens in championship locker rooms, where you can take like a dog that is, disobedient and it doesn't behave and is biting everybody, barking at the mailman. It's just out of control. You take that dog and you put him in a pack that understands how to behave and what's important and how to be a pro. And that person has no choice but to conform. Because I've seen it just as much as you have on the teams that I was on with the Patriots. So we always had something in common. And it seems like you had that championship team in Green Bay, the teams that you had at Notre Dame, and the teams at De La Salle all had a lot of things in common.
Yeah, the through thread there is great people, a strong culture, a clearly stated standard, everybody being clear on what their role and responsibility was and how they helped to create and establish and maintain that standard. And there was this rigorous adherence to what that was. And we were all committed to that. And we wouldn't compromise that or settle for less. We would hold each other accountable for that. It wasn't the coach's job to do that. Reggie would do that. Brett would do that. As fun-loving and, pranky as he was with stink bombs and the different things, like when he spoke, we listened because he had earned our trust. He would put it all on the line when we needed it. And it's interesting, man. I lost 2 games in high school, 7 in 4 years at Notre Dame, never finished lower than 15th and was top 10 3 times, went to back-to-back Super Bowls in Green Bay, and then I took a free agent deal out to the San Diego Chargers with Rodney Harrison in that locker room, with Junior Seau in that locker room. And Christian, I'll tell you, I was in that building maybe 3 or 4 days before I started looking around and saying, something's not right in here. And I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. But looking back, that was a culture that was not built around a championship mindset. It was a group of me's. The employees there didn't like to work there. People felt betrayed and backstabbed. They didn't take care of their older players like Rodney, like Junior, like LT, that still had a lot of gas in the tank. They made business decisions. And when you do that, you got young players that say, if they ain't taking care of Rodney, they ain't taking care of Junebug, they're not going to take care of me. So maybe I don't feel good enough to go today. I'm a free agent.
I think it is crazy. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because when you go from a championship culture and then you go to another team and it doesn't have that, I think you recognize it right away. Mm-hmm. And you immediately understand that regardless of how much talent you have, you're not going to win the championship. I don't know. I can't tell you how many teams. When I was with the Seattle Seahawks, we were always 8-8. Always. It's always something. And we had so much talent. They had put so many good people on that, good players on that team, but we can never. The best I ever finished there was 9-7, and we
Yep.
backdoored our way into the playoffs. And Mike Holmgren was the coach, and when he got there, he changed it right away. And then they end up going to a Super Bowl after I leave, but that's fine because I got 2 of my own, so I'm not, I'm not mad at all. But it is funny you say that. And after I left New England, I just couldn't tolerate anything other than what should be said, how players should act. Their standards should be equal to mine. I remember like holding a grudge and being mad at some of the players because their give a crap factor was like 0.
Yep.
Like, how can it be 0? And then I ended up just going, well, I guess this is just the way it is.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, people are the same way with friends. Like, you meet that guy at a party or when you were in school, and there'd just be something a little bit off, and he'd be the dude that would be starting the fight or whatever. And you're like, you got to weed those sort of bad apples out, man. It's if you ever have apples and they're in a barrel, you get that one bad one, it spreads quickly. You have to remove it and maintain it. And the reason people don't, Christian, is because it's hard.
Yeah,
it takes
uncomfortable.
Effort.
Yeah.
It takes discipline. It's uncomfortable, which is why what Saban did and what Belichick did simultaneously. Like, we watched the 2 greatest football dynasties in the history of our sport simultaneously with those 2. And to a person, there was a strict adherence to a standard and an expectation that was universally understood. And if you didn't understand it, you weren't there very long. People don't understand. It takes a different person to be able to maintain that container and that culture and that level of intensity consistently year over year over year. And that's why most people don't. They get comfortable. And the great thing about football is that it forces you to deny your basic human instincts to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And at some point, emotion overrides intellect, and you hit the easy button and you take your foot off the gas, and people stumble. Championship programs and organizations don't do that.
So if you were to pick 3 things that you think a coach needs to have or what they need to address, what would they be?
They've got to be a good leader, and that's kind of general, but I would say integrity, accountability,
honesty,
having a plan, being a straight shooter where they care enough about you to be honest with you about what you need to work on.
Love it. Yep.
And then give you the tools necessary or the specifics about what you can do to get yourself there. That's critically important.
So that seems like honesty, knowledge, right? Knowledge of it, because you have to be smart. You have to be able to teach it. If you don't know how to teach it, it doesn't matter how good I am. I'm not going to benefit from your honesty, right? And then the last thing I don't know, what would the last one be?
Yeah, I want to say integrity, and not in the sense that like he won't steal your wallet, but like that his heart's in the right place. That like that they're committed to being integral, like whole with you and as a team, and that there's a charge or a call that is universally understood that everybody points to, and that's why he's willing to do what he's willing to do and ask you to do what he's willing to do, and those sort of things. There's the definition of leadership that I love the most is a leader is a man that you would follow to a place you wouldn't go by yourself. And I think through that lens, all of those other words fall underneath it. But at the end of the day, it's a journey that you're going on with these men to a place that you've never been before. And if you're lucky enough, like you and I have been, to be at the right place at the right damn time, to be born with the right genes, to have parents or a coach that lit a fire in you and you were smart enough to listen, maybe, just maybe, you get a little taste of what that excellence is. And as hard as I worked and Belichick's organizations worked and Holmgren and all of that, as talented as we were, at the end of the day, man, I'm just grateful that I got to do what I got to do. Like, I worked hard, but a lot of people work hard and don't have near the success that I did. So even my work ethic, my genes, like my grandmother was 6'4". That's where I get my size from. My dad and mom never played sports. They probably couldn't even hold a football or a basketball. They wouldn't even probably know what they were. But somehow, some way, we end up on the road and the journey that we're on. And it's sports, man. This thing has taught me more about myself and stuff that I just couldn't have learned any other way. And that's why it's so important that we do it right. Yeah. That's why it's so important that young coaches admit that they don't know what they don't know. It's why as parents, we have to be crystal clear and check in with ourselves that we're not puking all our shit onto our kids. There's a difference when the kid gets in the car and you say, hey, how'd you play? Or did you win? Versus, did you have fun out there?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you learn? What do you think allowed the other team to win or to lose? Or what do you think impacted the result? If you played the game again, is there anything you do different? All right, what do you want for dinner? Like those conversations go so much farther and build so much character and develop love for sports instead of the outcome-based bullshit and the selling of dreams and going to the league or playing in the NBA and all these different camps and this year-round single sport focus stuff where we've lost sight of what's most important, and that's developing character, learning to be a good teammate, being accountable, goal setting, and being resilient, right? Like toughness is about how much pain and punishment you can dish out, but resilience is about how much pain and punishment you can endure. And Howard Mudd, the great offensive line coach, said it best. He said, to be in my room, you got to have both. He said, my job as a coach is to build my men so that they have no breaking point. And that's when we dish it out and we move men from point A to point B against their will. But it starts with resilience, our ability to endure, not dish it out. And that's a very subtle but a very important distinction that I think, unfortunately, we've lost a little bit of, which is why I'm so grateful you're doing this podcast, because I'll be honest, I've needed coaching as a dad because sometimes I say or do stupid stuff and I wished I knew what I could have done instead, because when we know better, we do better. And that's why I'm so grateful you're doing this podcast.
Yeah, man, I am the king of foot in mouth when it comes to my relationship. I swear to God, if I had like a rewind button, I would have been using it like crazy. And I don't want to keep you any longer. You've been really gracious with your time. The resiliency is, to me, such a sneaky asset that you like. If a guy gets hurt a lot, like you got hurt a lot when you first got to Green Bay and you finally play in every single game, that was worth something. Like you became, a different person. You have a quality that most people don't acquire unless you really go through some ish. You got to go through it. And not saying that someone who can't be resilient and tough. But I feel like the guys that deal with these crazy set of circumstances, overcoming injury time, it tests them. It tests them to find out exactly how badly they want it. How important is it to them? How badly do they want to be back in the herd and part of the community? And to me, so a guy that goes through that has a seat next to me anytime. Like anytime. Man, you will put the work in. You have earned this right. And we're going to find a way to get you some reps. Like that, to me, just gets me excited. And I didn't even want to take your time about youth because I feel like you really kind of touched on like what's happening in youth sports and what's really important when it comes to watching your kids play, what's the coach's message to that kid. It's so much more. You can worry about winning and losing when you get older. At this age, you just got to build them and create them and teach them the right lessons.